Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Folks are joining and we'll get started soon. Okay, while folks are trickling in, we have a lot of information to cover today. So I'm going to do some of the housekeeping while folks are still trickling in. So hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for SEEA's share out on phase one of our HERO project, opportunities for expanding the impact of efficient HVAC, water heating, and envelope retrofit markets in the Southeast. Before we begin, as a reminder, please feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A box and we will answer them all at the end. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all our registrants. Given the amount of content we have to share today, we are going to hop right into it. A big thank you to today's co-hosts, Eric Warland and Joan Glickman, as well as Dale Hoffmeyer for his contributions. Additionally, thank you to the many of the stakeholders present and the attendance today who contributed their expertise and perspective to our findings. I am Ashley. I am the Director of Policy for SEEA. So great to see you all today. And can we advance to the next slide? SEEA, as many of you know, we are the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. We are a nonprofit organization, member-based, and our mission, vision, and values are rooted in energy efficiency and using energy efficiency as a way to enhance the quality of life in the Southeast. Next slide. Our core services of research, facilitation, consultation, and education, program management, and financial services. We do this cross-collaboratively across our team between our policy, research, and our built environment. We do the core services. Next slide. Okay, project introduction. So this project is a shared project that is cross-functional between our built environment team and policy. Our objectives was to characterize Southeast residential market for heat pump water heaters and envelope improvements across the Southeast. Identify opportunities to grow demand for these upgrades, highlight successes to date. We interviewed utility programs across the Southeast, so a number of investor-owned utilities, EMCs, and municipal utilities, the supply chain and other market actors, so that's distributors, manufacturers, contractors. We identified programs, best practices, and other resources in the Southeast. We assessed market opportunities, and we developed strategic recommendations and opportunities for collaboration. Next slide. Okay, this slide is about the opportunities for heat pump water heaters in the Southeast. As you can see, heat pump water heaters make up less than 5% of purchases of new electric water heaters in the US, including the Southeast. So there's a big opportunity to upgrade people's efficient technology to water heating. In the Southeast, where electricity powers the vast majority of water heating, heat pump water heaters upon replacement will reduce utility bills significantly. If you look at this chart, you see that less than 5% of most of the United States, specifically concentrated in the Southeast, are 5% less than heat pump water heaters. So there's still a lot of room to grow. And when you look at this other chart, the bar chart here, it's the water heating fuel in the Southeast. As you can see, for the single family, multifamily, and manufactured homes in the Southeast, electricity is the fuel that's used to heat most of the water heaters in the United States, specifically in the Southeast. So there is lots of room to grow here for folks to, upon replacement or at upgrading time, to transition on to heat pump water heaters. Next slide. Opportunities for cost-effective envelope upgrades. So this project not only looked at water heaters, but also envelope upgrades. How are these incentives doing? How are these programs doing across the Southeast? So this chart here shows that the percent of housing stock with potential for cost-effective envelope upgrades is massive across the Southeast. So This shows that this is a projection of model homes across the Southeast. And so it shows you that 56% of Alabama and mobile homes would be ripe for cost-effective envelope upgrades. The same can be said for 51% of single-family homes and 48% of multifamily homes. And based upon basic envelope upgrade measures, which is attic insulation, duct sealing, a drill and fill wall insulation, it would save an average of $556 for electricity bills in these homes in those categories. And this is just basic envelope upgrades. It's not reflective of additional upgrades such as low east-storm awnings or solar shades and other higher incentives and upgrades that are there. We're going to move on to the next slide.
Great. Ashley, thanks so much. I'm going to take it on from here, and this is Joan. I'm going to stop my video just so it makes it easier for me to control my multiple systems, which I'm not very good at. And Eric and Dale are going to probably pipe in as well, but Ashley, you did a great job starting us off at a very fast pace, so I'm going to try to maintain that. And I'm going to turn off my video, as I said. Hopefully you guys can hear me. If not, let me know. So, let's see. So we're on slide 7, correct? Yep. So as Ashley was saying, there's a great opportunity here in the Southeast for heat pump water heaters, particularly since so many homes use electric resistance for water heating. It's gonna, it really pays off. And so a lot of utilities, many of whom are probably on the phone today and on the webinar, are providing all sorts of incentives ranging from $250 to $1,300 per unit. And I think the 1,300 is TVA, which is a really relatively new program. It's a midstream incentive program that they started just this last spring. And I think they've already had, more than 1,000, maybe 1,500 that are participating. So I'm not sure that's a known number, and I didn't speak to them specifically, but midstream incentives, as many of you probably know, is sort of the preferred way of doing business for manufacturers, distributors, and probably retailers too, because it's already built into the system. You don't have to do a lot of additional paperwork or any paperwork with the buyer, with the consumer. So they just see it. And instead of me paying, $2,000, if it's a $1,300 incentive, I'm seeing the price as a $700. So that's really very compelling when I go out, and especially since, as we know, heat pump water heaters tend to be more expensive than your regular water heater. And these incentives vary depending on the size, depending on, in some cases, income level. And I will say that kind of maybe a common theme throughout this is that there's a lot of variation among programs, both in terms of how they're providing as well as what levels they're providing of incentives across all sorts of different efficiency improvements. And the thing is, it's a little hard to know, is the program that's delivering, providing 400, what is that doing in terms of moving the market in that area versus the one that's, as we said, providing 1,200 or 1,300. And I'm not sure you can draw a straight line there in terms of a correlation between the two. I don't think there is, but I certainly do think that if you don't offer at least a fairly aggressive incentive, people are, they just find the first cost too high. Okay, next slide. So the incentives on, next slide, sorry. The incentives on envelope upgrades are probably even a little more confusing because as Ashley said, there's lots of different kinds of envelope improvements. Some folks are focusing on windows, others are doing insulation or air sealing. And in some cases, you have weatherization programs that are providing that for free. The other thing that's a little tricky with envelope is not just that there's so many different things, but there's different kinds of contractors and not everyone does everything. And also people just don't realize that there's going to be a lot of benefits to that. It's sort of an invisible improvement. So it's not top of mind, and it's also not something that just breaks. The house might be, quote, in some ways broken to begin with, but you don't realize it the way you realize if your AC breaks. Obviously, then it's something you need to replace. Whereas insulation, air sealing, all that stuff is kind of behind the scenes, not top of mind. And unless you make it easy for people, they're just not going to do that sort of stuff, even though it can create, a lot of benefits, certainly a lot of comfort benefits, and also um, benefits in terms of their costs, their utility bills. Okay, next slide. So we were talking about this slide and what it means. And Eric and Dale, I hope you guys will interrupt me if I'm going too fast. You guys should just pipe up. Anyway, so what we're saying here is, and by no means are we saying it's not a good idea to offer incentives for efficiency improvements. It's just showing that, given what Ashley said at the beginning there, that the market for heat pump water heaters, not just in the Southeast, but most of the country, and then envelopes, there are so many opportunities where these things would save people money. They would provide, great services and improve comfort, in some cases improve, grid reliability even. They're just not invested in because the market hasn't just taken off. It's not what the default is for people to go out there and do these improvements. So providing incentives is great, but it's not enough. So next. So we're going to talk a little bit about why people don't do all this stuff that we think is great. Well, first of all, certainly the first cost of heat pump water heaters, even with some incentives, it can be overwhelming to folks, and it's just not what they're looking at, paying an additional 1,000 or 500 or whatever it is for that versus a conventional one, even if they're going to save money on their monthly bills and might recover their costs very quickly. There's also just a lack of consumer awareness about the different options, the benefits. There still is quite a bit of misinformation about problems associated, particularly with heat pumps. Heat pump water heaters are still seen as sort of a newer technology. If you have contractors who aren't familiar with it, they might still be saying things about, those of the past that may not have worked well, or they might say, well, you don't have enough room. Even though we found that a lot of these sort of are misconceptions and actually of technologies. It's not going to work everywhere, but certainly heat pump water heaters are a good fit for many, many residences. Envelope improvements are tricky because they can be disruptive. It's not easy to go in and do insulation all the time, or air sealing, duct sealing. It's not a one size fits all. You have to have the right contractors who are willing to do it. In some cases, you need to address health and safety before you start tightening up a house. And then if, let's say getting back to the heat pump water heater, if you're out of hot water, you want hot water, right? You don't want to wait a while. And so if you're in an area where there aren't a lot of heat pump water heaters being sold, there can be delays, and people don't necessarily want to wait an extra week to get hot water. I can certainly understand that. There's also a seller's bias. So like if I'm a contractor who knows a specific type of equipment, I've been selling that brand forever, and I've been selling that type from that company forever, I know how to put it in. Obviously, my time is money. So if I don't want to be called back, I don't want it to take longer than I expected, I don't necessarily want to learn a new skill to put something else in that's different. So there is definitely a bias, which is just a natural bias because people need to make a living. So if you don't understand something and you haven't found it to be really profitable and lucrative to invest time in learning how to do that, it's just not going to take off. And then, as I said, some things are just invisible. It's just not exciting to think about insulation or air sealing. I mean, who even knows what air sealing is for most people? So it's not something you're like, wow, I can't wait to invest in that duct sealing that I've just been dying to do since I moved in. Okay, so next.
Can I just interject real quickly that thanks, Joan, that the seller's bias one, I think there's even more to it than as it's written here. To me, a contractor has to actually want to to sell that new equipment and install that that new envelope retrofit that includes air sealing instead of just insulation or whatever. And it takes a deliberate business model change in order for a contractor to decide that they're going to bring that on. It's not just a bias towards what they're used to. It's also the cost associated with the business costs associated with adding a new product line to your offering or a new service or whatever. And that's important, I think, to emphasize because our programs, if they're going to be successful for most of these upgrades, there is going to be a contractor involved. And if that contractor is not real excited about it, and they are waiting for customers to say, I hear there's a rebate, then they're not going to help us sell those upgrades. So we have to think about how to help them make it a good improvement to their business model to sell these new services and products. And naturally, if they embrace it, then that seller's bias changes organically. That's an important one for me because most of these upgrades don't happen without a contractor. So we have to think about how to make the contractor want to participate. Back to
I
you.
completely agree. Yeah. And I think we get to some of that later in our recommendations and even in the next slide, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. As I said, envelope can be particularly tricky. Not just does it mean a lot of different things for the home, and some homes need one thing and some homes need many things, but it also involves lots of different people. I mean, you've got roofers and siding contractors and window installers, and then you've just got salespeople. You don't necessarily know who to call for any of it or all of it. Some of it, I mean, obviously, if you need a new roof, you'll be able to find a roofer, but it's kind of niche. Certainly air sealing, duct sealing, and insulation are by no means something that's not been around for a tremendous amount of time, but it's not necessarily built in. It's built in when you're building a new home or when you're doing a big renovation. They'll be doing all that to meet code, but once you have a house, it's just very tricky with an existing home. So, and we were saying that this slide, I mean, this graphic has been around for a long time, and I think it's really useful, but Eric and I were talking about maybe it's a little too intimidating to people because, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff you can do with envelope. It's lots of little arrows going every different direction. So given the complexity of all this, what we, Eric and SEEA and Dale and I talked to lots of different people and came up with some recommendations for how we think if we have a goal of, really moving the market on heat pump water heaters and envelope upgrades, how can we get there in the Southeast? So moving on to the next slide 13. Great. So one of the things is really looking across the supply chain. So you can go to the next one. Or maybe not quite. Yep, there we go. And thinking about everyone who's involved. So you've got obviously consumers, you have the utility programs that are offering these incentives. In some cases, you might have other programs, state programs. I was working on state energy offices on the IRA rebates, which also feed into some of this. You've got the contractors clearly are a huge player, and then manufacturers, distributors, and retailers. So lots of different entities, and they're driven by, their own specific interests. So homeowners, certainly they want to save money. They are concerned about the first cost, but they also want something that's reliable. They want to be comfortable, and they don't want to monkey around for a long time necessarily with contractors. They want to know what they're getting and make it not disruptive. People are busy. They also don't like a big mess in their house. So like sometimes some of these improvements are just not going to be things that they're seeking out or that they may have some reluctance in pursuing. For contractors, as Eric was saying, time is money, and their business, propositions are whatever it is that's been making them money all along. And so going in a new direction is not necessarily something they're going to just jump at, even if there's an incentive that even a homeowner is asking them about. Not that they wouldn't look into it, but it's not necessarily something that they're going to be excited about unless they see it as a long-term smart investment for their business. So they want to make sure that it's speedy and that things are reliable. They want it reliable too, because they want to have, good references and referrals, and they also want to have minimal callbacks. They also want to know that if they're participating in a program, that it will lead to leads. So leads are really, that translates into dollars for them, and it's a business for contractors, obviously, as we know. Utility programs, I think the key is understanding, what is driving the utility program, and the regulators, if they are a regulated utility. So is it energy savings? Is it concerns about the lowest income customers, or just in general customer satisfaction? Are there worries about grid reliability and trying to reduce peak in the summer or winter, or both? So depending on what the interest is, it will drive how you want to design your program. Public programs obviously have their own goals, whatever they've been mandated to do. And then manufacturers, similar, and distributors and retailers, they want to have, just like a contractor, they want to have a good reputation. They want the sales volume, particularly those with high profit margins, to go up. And they want people to be happy so that they will come back and buy their brand again, or come back to their store again. Okay.
So can I interject before we go to the next slide that to me, all of these things are true. And when you look at it this way, the key interests vary a lot among all these different participants. So I like to think of it as I like to use the term supply chain here, because if we're going to increase the sales of heat pump water heaters in the Southeast, for instance, we're going to have to make program design decisions that address each of the interests for each of these members of the supply chain. The manufacturer has to want to sell to the Southeast region. The distributors want to sell, or the retailers, that product, and they want to if it's a retailer, for instance, they have to have a motivation to make shelf space for that particular product or whatever. The contractors, as we discussed before, have to make a profit, and it costs them extra money to change their business model or add a new service. So we have to make it worth their while to do that. And then we also have to make it simple and easy, non-disruptive, and the benefits visible to the homeowners. All of those things have to work if you're going to have a successful program with a lot of participation. So that's why I like to think of it as a supply chain, because in any business, if there is a disruption to one link in the supply chain, things go south. If you can't find a part or whatever, then the car that you bought doesn't work until that part gets replaced or whatever. So it's the same kind of thing here, is that we have to have, for each link in the supply chain, it has to work. And it's pretty easy to fall into a trap to be thinking pretty much about your ratepayers and the utility commission requirements and all that sort of thing. Most utility programs are thinking about contractors, et cetera. It's less common to see programs that have figured out how to make all of these players' interests work out effectively. But the programs that are the most successful, we see that there's something in it for all of the links in the supply chain.
Excellent. Yep. So it's a little more complicated than everybody would like to think, probably. Okay, so next slide. Thank you. 14. So in addition to so first you think about what is going to motivate all the folks that you need to motivate. And then you have to think about so what's an effective incentive program? What do I want to target? Am I trying to target a specific sector of my service territory? Am I trying to focus on things that are going to affect the grid? As I said, peak. Is there a way that I can establish instant rebates? Because everybody knows that paperwork and delays are not only a hassle, but sometimes are just a non-starter for companies or people, or consumers. So if I have to put out of pocket the additional $1,000 before I get reimbursed, that's just not a possibility for some consumers. And after a while, it's certainly not a possibility for contractors either, because they can't be waiting to be reimbursed for equipment they've purchased already and installed for a long period of time. They can do it for a little bit, but they can only they need a cash flow to work out for them. The incentive levels obviously have to be high enough, and then there is some opportunity, although things have changed recently with, or are changing with the tax credits, but there are opportunities, whether it's within your state, with state rebates or utility rebates, or incentives for manufacturers, et cetera, as well as tax credits in some cases that are still available, to stack them. There are sometimes restrictions and it can be complicated. So communicating that to homeowners and getting them to be able to understand how to use them properly is not always simple. And there have been some, we're only mentioning a few programs. There are so many great programs out there, and many more that I'm sure we need to learn from and see what's going well. And that's part of the next steps of, where our recommendations need to be taken to the next step in terms of understanding what's working well. But at Duke in Florida, there's been a lot of participation with their free home energy checks. I think they've done a lot with insulation, and building a really qualified contractor network. Again, in Florida here, Florida Power and Light, they provide instant rebates. They were focused on, at least at the time, what could be done between tax credits and the instant rebate. So kind of making that very clear. You put in your zip code, it takes you to the right place and then tells you what you can do if you're buying insulation or you're buying a heat pump or whatever. Okay, next slide. It's also, not only a smart idea to do, think about how you're going to communicate whatever program you're putting out there, but it could really save a lot of money and time and effort if there was a coordinated strategy across the different players. So if your appliance retailers or insulation retailers and distributors and manufacturers are all on the same page with you as a utility program, communicating clear messaging to consumers can really, make a big difference. It's also, part of it is just equipping sales staff and then also equipping your contractor base to understand how to best, not just, install something, but also how to sell the benefits, et cetera. So JEA has done a great job, also in Florida. I guess I picked a bunch of Florida folks, but not to, no bias there. Sorry about that. They've done a lot to drive participation in their programs by just doing a lot of outreach, a tremendous amount of outreach in their low-income communities, bringing in qualified crews, doing a lot to coordinate across all of the different key participants in the supply chain. Okay, next. And I think this is the second to last recommendation here, and the last one's sort of more global, is contractors are key, right? You can't get the market to take off if you don't have contractors who want to participate, are well qualified to participate, know how to participate, not just, like what qualifies for incentive, but how to process things, whether they're offering it to the consumer directly or getting them to send in paperwork or whatever it is if you can't do the instant part. And there's a lot of opportunity here to really work with manufacturers on training, which I'm sure many of you already do. Contractors need to see that it's going to generate leads for them, and they need to make it not too hard to participate. So obviously you want to have some kind of quality assurance that is making sure people are getting good quality, but how much you build in upfront by having a really highly qualified, trained contractor network versus having to do additional later, it's a balance. So figuring that out and making it something that works for all parties, but particularly the contractors, is key to getting something to take off in the market. Establishing requirements for your contractors. In the case of Jackson Electric, they actually pay for the cost of the BPI technical certifications that they require. So recognizing that they may otherwise not get contractors to want to participate in the program if they have enough other work. And as we know, there's a contractor shortage in most places. So it's not that contractors don't have other work. So if you want them to participate in a program that's pushing something new, again, just as Eric said, it has to be worth their while. And then there has been a lot of collaboration between utility programs and manufacturers and distributors on training. I think, as I mentioned earlier, manufacturers, distributors tend to like midstream incentives. It's less, I think, work for them, and it's just something that they believe will work better to push their products. And they also need it to be a higher level. So I think you'll get more uptake, obviously, and involvement of these manufacturers if you reach a certain threshold. Not to say you shouldn't try. It obviously depends on, what your resources are. Okay, so next slide. And then I'm going to pass it back to Ashley. So all of this, understanding what the different market actors need, creating incentive programs that work, creating a contractor network that works, and making sure you communicate all of it, it's really necessary to do that across the supply chain. And it's clear that that takes more effort up front and even potentially along the way. But it can make the whole process smoother. You could potentially have economies of scale where you're spreading the cost of training and outreach across different players and different market actors who are all have some common interest, even if it's not that all of your interests are exactly the same, which they're not. As long as you can create programs that align and are meeting and understanding the interests of different players, you're much more likely to succeed. And then one of the things that I think we're trying to sort of see if it can gain some traction is figuring out, is there additional kind of coordination or at least lessons learned that can happen among utilities? So there are all these programs out there, but it's a little hard to know which ones are leading to greater uptake. So understanding, what is really going on in these different programs, and not so much like so that like, oh, this one did well and this one didn't, but knowing that, this program that offered a $500 incentive and this one that offered a $600 incentive for the same product, one took off much more than the other. And maybe that's because of their customer base, but maybe it's also because of whatever contractor training they did or other things that are just not obvious if you just look at the dollar amounts. Finding those solutions, sharing solutions to shared challenges, and then obviously sending coordinated signals to the market wherever possible. So if you're not dealing with just a very diverse, diffuse set of incentives that are targeting all sorts of things at different levels and have different requirements, it gets confusing, and the market is just not going to respond as well as it would if you have a coordinated effort. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Ashley.
Thanks.
Or if Eric or if Dale, go ahead.
Yep. So this is the part where we talk about some potential opportunities. So a lot of requirements for program components across utilities. So especially this is really important and when utilities have shared territories and shared customers, or when utility or not shared customers, but when their areas are overlapping. So contractor training, certifications, equipment specific specifications. If you share an area with another utility, making sure or aligning your program requirements so that contractors are not trying to figure out which utility has which incentives in different areas when they're working across the shared territories is really valuable. We learned this, this project, it has continued for 2.0. So this is the 1.0, but we just had a conversation with the utility the other day. And when they were starting up their program, they matched their incentive to the utility that was also within their shared territory, so that customers and contractors would be able to know that, they offered the same incentives and they aligned the program requirements so that I was similar. So there wasn't much constraints on the contractor when they were trying to get them engaged. Develop and implement a coordinated consumer awareness campaign with supply chain partners that enhances understanding and visibility of priority upgrades. How are you talking to your customers? And how is the market and the supply chain talking to your customers? Is it in inserts? Is it in emails? But making sure that you guys are saying the same message and making sure that message is understandable for the customer. Most of these technologies, most customers do not understand. So breaking it down in a way that is talking to them about the value and the savings versus more of the technology behind it. Share anonymous program data to identify ideal practices or circumstances for a variety of program types. So this is something that has been a little difficult for us in this project to understand for those whose regulators don't require specific breakdowns of which measures are driving your incentives or how you're doing in specific measures versus the whole program. This would be very helpful to understand how programs are doing, how they're measuring up, and what is helping to achieve certain goals. And we know that it may not just be the incentives alone. It could be your incentives, it could be your contractor training, it could be your qualified network, it could be your distributor and manufacturers. But how what that data looks like and being able to share that amongst your utilities would be very helpful, especially when other utilities are thinking about starting an incentive and starting a program, and really wanting to understand those barriers and challenges up front. Identify opportunities for regional resources to drive uptake of priority improvements. So searchable list of qualifying products, retailer handouts, again, focusing on regional coordination where possible in order to drive uptake across a territory. Host webinars and or peer exchange. So what we're doing today to share lessons learned from successful programs and provide information on topics of interest. So I want to shamelessly plug our summit this year because TVA is going to do a session on their program. So that will be a space where you can learn about the successes and the challenges and the barriers and why TVA's program is working. Using existing analytical resources to help target incentives toward most beneficial improvements and priority building stock. So there are a number of lab, like Enroll and PNL have a number of data that is publicly available, using that data for housing developments to understand, like, hey, there may be a section of housing developments within your territory that may be ripe for upgrades, right? These homes were built, they're at end of the life for their systems, and those can be targeted, those could, have targeted marketing towards those housing developments. Test new delivery models, partner with renovation contractors. This is one of the things that we learned from contractors about consumer challenges. A contractor may come in and see like, oh, they are ripe for an upgrade in terms of their water heating, but in order for them to reach those savings, they're going to have to do some insulation. So, that becomes now that the consumer has to deal with two different contractors, one to put in the water heating, another one to do the insulation or whatever else that contractor feels that they need to in order to get those savings. So partner with renovation contractors. They're already in that house tearing things up. Can you create relationships so that consumers can get these upgrades all together? Siding and roofing companies to incorporate upgrades in home services and expand training on priority needs and gaps. That new delivery models was also something that we learned talking to different contractors who maybe originally only did plumbing or only did HVAC. And then because of consumers asking them and their customers asking them about different retrofits, they started adding and building out their business models to make sure that they're targeting and getting all of those customers' needs in one shot. So they already have that relationship with the contractor. So that's something that is ripe for consideration. Next slide. Okay. Before we get to the participant feedback, and we want to talk to y'all and get y'all's take on what else are you looking for and other opportunities that SEEA is thinking about and how we can be helpful in this space. I want to leave, we have some time, so I want to leave it open for any questions that we have from the audience. You can drop them in the chat, or I think you can come off of mute. Or can they come off of mute, Lily? I'm not sure.
Maybe, but if they raise their hand, I can.
Okay. I don't see any questions in the chat, and I don't see any hands raised. Lily, do you see any hands raised?
No, I would go ahead and
Okay.
launch the poll.
Okay, let's launch the poll, please. Okay, if you could take the opportunity to fill out these polling questions, this would be great. As I said before, SEEA is looking for ways in which we could explore these opportunities more, topics that you would want to do a deeper dive into, and resources that you think SEEA is right to be able to share out and develop. I'm going to give y'all a minute or so to answer the poll question for question number 1. And I'll read it out. Which of the discussed opportunities are you interested in exploring? Select no more than 3. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. Question number 2. Oh, I see they're all there. Never mind, you just got to scroll down. If there are other ways that you'd like to see SEEA work with utilities and or stakeholders to help drive uptake of heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, and or envelope upgrades, please type in your suggestion. The third question, if you are interested in pursuing one or more of these opportunities, what methods of collaboration do you think would be most effective, either as first or ongoing steps? You can select multiple methods here. Somebody say, oh, okay. And we'll wrap up with the last question. If future efforts include engagement of outside experts on priority topics through webinars or other methods, which of the following topics are of greatest interest?
Hey, Ashley, I see the question regarding the screen/question not available. It should be a pop-up on your screen, but if you're in the event you're not getting it, we do intend to send out the recording. We're probably going to post it to our SEEA YouTube plug to go check it out. But we can also send out these questions in a survey type format, and you can fill them in if you would like a little extra time. But we really appreciate any feedback and insights that y'all have, so we can drive our initiatives around the priorities of our partners and members. So if you're not able to do it now, you just scroll down. But yeah, either way, we'll send them out with the resource as well at the end, as well as the slides.
Okay, Lily, can you see the responses?
Katie would have to share them. I don't have control to that.
Yes, I'm
Katie?
pulling them up right now.
Thank you. Okay. So it looks like, okay. So for the first question, which of the discussed opportunities are you interested in exploring? It looks like the top three are align requirements for program components across utilities, followed by sharing program data, and then, oh, two are tied, develop regional resources to drive uptake and host webinars. Okay, we have that noted. For the next question, I think those are long answers, so we'll have to look at those. But for number three, okay, so experts on topics of interest and small groups discussions via scheduled calls. We do have stakeholder advisory groups with these, with this project, so we can get y'all all involved in that for those who want to participate. And then for the last question, if future efforts include engagement of outside experts. So we have three ties, which is midstream incentives, setting effective incentive levels, and contractor engagement lead generating strategies. Thank y'all so much for that insight. That is great insight for us to be able to develop resources and materials and know ways in which SEEA can support its members and can support the region. So we will take that feedback in for this project and for our programs and be responsive to y'all's needs. Simona, I see that you dropped a question in the chat. What factors did you consider for the potential study? If you're able to share some key points there, is this mainly focused on appropriateness of technology based on building stock or based on past customer investment behaviors, willing or, okay, those are a lot of questions. Hold on. Let me take a moment. Dale and Joan, and can you all see what Simona put in the chat?
I don't think I can see the chat. I can see some of it, but
It
not.
says, well, the first question is, what factors did you consider for the potential study? If you're able to share some key points there.
I don't know if Eric or Dale want to take, or any of you at SEEA want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, so when you say factors, so the original start of this project was to really just understand the landscape at first. So we talked to utilities across the region, understanding, and we pulled data that was publicly available about who had what. So who had water heating incentives, what were those incentives levels like for those whose programs have been running for a number of years and had publicly available data. We pulled the measures and data. So how many measures that they were doing, what was their incentive level like, how many contractors, if they had a contractor network, what were the qualifications. We did a lot of just kind of fact finding in the beginning of this project because this is the first time SEEA had gone into this space. And let me see what the rest of the question was because it disappeared.
And just to add to that, Ashley, I think
Yes.
also, I don't know if we mentioned this or if you mentioned it up front, that there's a second part of this project that's looking at the heat pump side of it for air source. So the initial part was really looking at heat pump water heaters and the opportunities there, and then envelope. So kind of the main three ways to, affect the efficiency of a building are, envelope, heating and cooling, and water heating. And so that's, I think, where those three priorities came from.
And then I saw that, yeah, our potential was primarily based on building stock data that we sourced from across the Southeast. And then we defined cost effective was really defined by what those utilities had defined it as per their regulators. So we were just looking at the incentives levels and the programs that were already pre-established. We did not take any kind of independent analysis of the cost effectiveness. We used what utilities had already established.
And I might just add, if the question is about the slide we showed where on envelope improvements, that was in the modeling analysis, which was primarily based on building stock, and then where it was cost effective is based on the life, the savings based on the life of the cost, an estimated cost of the upgrade, and then life of the measure. So that's that for that one study, you can kind of look, I think the source is provided on the slide. You can, there's a report that, that goes along with that. If the question was specifically about that one slide.
Any last questions before we wrap up?
Ashley, we have enough time that we can circle back once you're done, if they do come up.
Okay. Just want to do some shameless plugs before we let y'all go. Coming up next, we are continuing on with this project. This was just a shortened webinar of what we found. We are continuing on, and we are in the second phase of this project, which is expanded to heat pumps. So we are again talking to the supply chain, as Eric mentioned, utilities across the region, manufacturers, distributors, contractors, those involved in the supply chain. So if you are interested, when we send out the slides and we send out the link, our contact information is there. If you want to participate, please let us know. We are in development of different case studies. There will be a project closer session at our summit this year. So we will be talking about 1.0 and 2.0. And then we will also be able to talk about some of the findings that we're learning from our peer organizations in different parts of the country and what they're seeing and how the Southeast compares and what we can learn and take from that. And additional initiatives, again, are based upon the results of the survey. We will take that feedback that we learned from you all today, incorporate that, and provide those resources for you that you all want. Next slide. Okay, upcoming events. We are partnering with one of our partners, Driving Forward. Virginia continues to accelerate EV adoption. So we are partnering with, this is a team project, and we have an event that is going to happen on September the 6th in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So if you are in that area, please sign up. Please scan this QR code to learn more information and to sign up. Please share this out with your partners. Our Southeast Energy Summit registration is open. We have just selected the panelists, so we will update the agenda probably within the next couple of weeks. And so our annual summit is in Atlanta this year. It's going to be really, really good. Registration is open, and I think early bird prices are still available.
And that's it, Ashley.
Okay. All right. If there are no more questions, we are a little bit right before time. So I want to give anybody any last questions or thoughts they want to share. Give you a moment. If not, thank you so much today to Eric and Joan and Dale for hopping on, and thank you for helping us with this project. Thank you to Lily and Katie and Sydney for all their help in getting this webinar together and doing all of the behind the scenes. And I see somebody. Okay, oh, wait, I see one question. Okay, thank you so much, Simona. All right, guys, thank you so much. Have a good day. See you later. Bye-bye.